John Kennedy, Lee Iacocca, Barbara Jordan, Ronald Reagan, some of the world's great presenters, men and women who stood before an audience, presented their ideas, and changed the course of history. The great presenters all have traveled the road to presentation excellence. And for them and for you, that first step is the most difficult, overcoming the fear of speaking before a group. Today, you'll find out how to overcome that fear by learning and using the principles and skills of presentation excellence. To do this, we're going to use the same approach that an aspiring writer uses to study great books, or an aspiring artist uses to study the masters. We'll watch and listen to those who did it best.
We shall pay any price, bear any burden, meet any hardship, support any friend, oppose any foe, to assure the survival and the success of liberty.
When all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual, free at last, thank God Almighty, we are free at last.
If we don't believe in our products, why should you? So if you can find better protection, take it. If you can find a better car, buy it.
What is it? What is it about the Democratic Party that makes it the instrument the people use?
If we care what our children and our children's children will say of us, if we want them one day to be thankful for what we did here in these temples of freedom, we will work together to make America better for our having been here.
Americans love a winner and will not tolerate a loser. Americans play to win all the time. I wouldn't give a hoot in hell for a man who lost and laughed.
There's no magic to presentation excellence, but there is a single dynamic principle that powers every presentation skill. Analyze your audience. 2,000 years ago, Aristotle called it the first principle of effective speaking, and it still is today. Analyze your audience. Know their language, why they're listening, what gets their attention, what they find persuasive. And most important, know their point of view and use this knowledge to guide them in a shared exploration of your subject. Now, John F. Kennedy certainly understood his audience on May 25th, 1961. He was to set the stage for America's trip to the moon. Kennedy faced his audience, decision makers in Congress, through the media, military leaders, business people, and the American public. He knew the various goals of these different subgroups and their shared values. They valued a strong military. They feared the Russian influence, and they were not about to accept being number 2 in the race for the moon.
For while we cannot guarantee that we shall one day be first, we can guarantee that any failure to make this effort will make us lost. I believe we should go to the moon, but I think every citizen of this country, as well as the members of the Congress, should consider the matter carefully in making their judgment, to which we've given attention over many weeks and months. New objectives and new money cannot solve these problems. They could, in fact, aggravate them further unless every scientist, every engineer, every serviceman, every technician, contractor, and civil servant gives his personal pledge that this nation will move forward with the full speed of freedom in the exciting adventure of space.
What a moment. Man on the way to the moon. Now let's see how you can use the same principles of audience analysis used by presidents and journalists. Your audience may not be Congress. It may not be the American public, but it's still people with different attitudes and values which affect how they will interpret your message. For instance, Bruce Smart, chairman of the board of Continental Group, addressed an audience of young Los Angeles business people. Their concern, the struggle between economic and environmental priorities.
When it comes to choosing between the economy and the environment, many Americans have convictions that are deeply and passionately held, whatever side they may be on. My theme today is that no responsible citizen can safely continue to be blindly committed to a single side of these great issues.
Even when you're presenting to a small group within your company, the time you invest in reflecting on them will repay you many times over. Know their positions in the company, their functions. Know who the decision makers are and their attitudes toward your subject. This knowledge will give you the insight you need to design an effective presentation. Hand in hand with the principle of knowing your audience is a second principle.
Who would be in the audience, because in great measure, knowing that determines the purpose of that presentation, whether you are going to inform that group, whether you are going to persuade that group, or you're going to have a combination where you try to persuade, where you try to inform, and you try to motivate. Without a doubt, one must know that audience, one must know that purpose. Lacking that, you're not going to have success in a speaking situation.
Purpose is your purpose to inform, to persuade, to inspire, to motivate. When reporting on the space program, my purpose was to inform clearly, to give my audience the facts and to define the terms that they needed to understand this new frontier. For instance, TLI.
Apollo 8, Houston. Go ahead, Houston. Apollo 8, you are go for TLI. Over. Roger, understand. We're go for TLI.
Go for TLI, translunar injection, meaning to fire up the third stage engine to drive the astronauts up to a speed of more than 24,000 miles per hour, break them free of Earth orbit, and send them off to where no man had ever gone, toward the moon. When Lee Iacocca faced the Congress to request loan guarantees for Chrysler, his purpose, persuasion.
We need help, and we need it soon. We have to come to the federal government. I might say I come with great reluctance. But I come in genuine need to ask for a loan guarantee to support our efforts to try to restore Chrysler to profitability.
John Kennedy was at his most eloquent when his purpose was to inspire, to speak to the hearts of his listeners.
Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
And we all recognize when the purpose is to motivate.
I don't want to get any messages saying that we are holding our position. We're not holding anything. Let the Hun do that. We are advancing constantly, and we're not interested in holding on to anything except the enemy. We're going to hold on to him by the nose, and we're going to kick him in the ass. We're going to kick the hell out of him all the time, and we're going to go through him like crap through a goose.
Let's look back now to the beginning steps we've made on the road to presentation excellence. We've examined the importance of knowing your audience. Know their language, why they're listening, what gets their attention, what they find persuasive. Know their point of view. Know their positions in the company, their functions. Know who the decision makers are and their attitudes toward your subject. This knowledge will give you the insight you need to design an effective presentation. The second principle of presentation excellence, clearly defining your purpose. Purpose is your purpose to inform, to persuade, to inspire, to motivate. Understanding the concepts which we've discussed alone won't make you a better presenter, but using them will. Now, apply these ideas in each presentation. The road to presentation excellence is a lifelong journey. As you're about to see, no one attains perfection.
Don't try to frighten us with your sorcerer's ways, Lord Vader. Your sad devotion to that ancient religion has not helped you conjure up the stolen data tapes or given you clairvoyance enough to find the rebels' hidden fortune?
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
Please stop the player now.
We start with a look at your presentation's basic building blocks. There are three: open, body, close. A structure we see every day in television commercials. The commercial open gets your attention.
If a manufacturer doesn't have enough confidence in the quality of what he makes, he doesn't have the right to ask you to buy it. And it doesn't make any difference what he makes: washing machines, toasters, or roller skates.
The body gives product benefits, the main points.
Chrysler will protect your investment three ways. One, a 5-year or 50,000-mile protection plan on the engine and powertrain. 2, 5 years or 50,000 miles rust-through protection on the outside of the car. 3, 5-year or 50,000-mile free scheduled maintenance.
The close moves you toward the purpose, to persuade you to buy the product.
So if you can find better protection, take it. If you can find a better car, buy it.
Your presentation should use the same form as a commercial. Like a commercial, it should be clear and to the point. All lean, no fat. That calls for careful preparation. Someone once asked Woodrow Wilson how long he would prepare for a 10-minute speech. He said, 2 weeks. How long for a 1-hour speech? 1 week. How long for a 2-hour speech? He answered, I'm ready right now. When you're open, you must gain your audience's attention, obviously. And you've got to tell them what you will talk about. Several techniques exist to gain audience attention. On many occasions, when President Ronald Reagan faced the nation, he used startling facts as a means of gaining attention.
Let me just give a few attention getters from the audience. The federal budget is out of control, and we face runaway deficits of almost $80 billion for this budget year that ends September 30th. That deficit is larger than the entire federal budget in 1957. And so is the almost $80 billion we will pay in interest this year on the national debt.
Here's an attention-getting opener by Lee Iacocca, a humorous personal experience.
You know, the other night I was on a dais in New York City at the Waldorf Ballroom with Bob Hope. And Bob Hope said that life runs in cycles, that sometimes you're drinking the wine and sometimes you're picking the grapes. Last week I was sipping the wine. I was on vacation. Then I made a hell of a mistake. I came back, and I've been picking grapes ever since. On Monday, the Japanese announced they'll send more cars to the United States next year. On Tuesday, we got hit with a wildcat strike that has our whole company shut down today. On Wednesday, that's yesterday, we unveiled our new minivan in Canada. And the side door on this new wagon is a sliding door, and there's a child safety latch, and it got stuck in full view of every TV camera in the world. And 6 of our top managers were trapped inside.
Some speakers gain attention by beginning with a joke.
I have a couple of announcements to make. The Cornish game hens served today were left over from the Udall 76 campaign. I remember last year when the radio television correspondents had their dinner and Jim Watt was there with the president, and Mark Russell got up and said, Mr. President, I wish to announce that the 800 roast ducks just consumed by this distinguished audience were personally strangled by the Secretary of Interior.
Another attention-getting technique for openings is to refer to the occasion. The 1976 Democratic Convention, keynote speaker Barbara Jordan did this and did it well.
It was 144 years ago that members of the Democratic Party first met in convention to select a presidential candidate. Since that time, Democrats have continued to convene once every 4 years and draft a party platform and nominate a presidential candidate. And our meeting this week is a continuation of that tradition. But there is something different about tonight. There is something special about tonight. What is different? What is special? I, Barbara Jordan, am a keynote speaker.
A startling fact, a personal experience, a joke, a reference to the occasion. All are attention-getting techniques you can use in your open. But how do you choose which is appropriate? Your understanding of the audience and your presentation purpose should be your guide. And once you've gained attention, you should tell the audience what you're going to talk about. Make it simple, clear, and concise.
What I really want to do is to run down very briefly on an interpretation, as I see it, of the current economic situation, on the prospects for inflation and on the prospects for interest rates, and then I will open it up for general discussion, and I will try to be very brief.
To review, your open accomplishes two goals. It gets the audience to listen, and it lets them know what you're going to talk about. Once that's done, you move into the body of your presentation. The body is the place to deliver your main points, to present your message in a logical pattern, to introduce your proof and your supporting evidence. Logical patterns allow the audience to understand, store, and recall the information they receive. The pattern you select should be based on your material, your analysis of the audience, and your purpose. Here are some examples. When your purpose is to persuade, you can use a problem-solution pattern. Lee Iacocca used this pattern to keep his audience listening while he drove home his main points. First, the problem.
And then, if we didn't have enough problems, we've got those horrendous federal deficits of $200 billion a year, and they're going to be $200 billion a year for the next 5 years. That comes to $1 trillion, whatever that is.
Iacocca's audience understood the problem. They were concerned. He went on using the second half of the problem-solution pattern, a possible solution.
Well, I tried to suggest a solution last year. I don't want to drop any names, but I dropped in on the Prez in the Oval Office, and I said to him, Mr. President, I have a solution here. I think if you could announce, because you're so good on TV, that the $120 billion deficit at that time could be cut in half. Just today, it's cut in half. Should be done quick and now, and there's an easy way to do it. First, you cut 5% out of the defense budget. Unilaterally, you do that. 5% cut would save $15 billion. Then, I said to the President, you call in the Democrats and say, hey, big spenders, come in here a minute. You match my $15 billion, because the HEW budget, health, education, welfare, is bigger than the defense budget. Then comes the hard part. Well, you slap a surtax on imported oil to raise another $15 billion a year. And then finally, you match that 15 with another 15 cents at the gas pump. What am I saying to you? 15, 15, 15, and 15 is 60. Half revenue, half cost, Democrats, Republicans share. The beauty of the program is it spreads the sacrifice equally among all of our people, among both political parties, among business and labor, and it's sort of like we did at Chrysler. That's $60 billion.
The familiar problem-solution pattern helped Iacocca present his views logically. A second pattern is cause and effect. This one has wide business application. For example, a change in pricing, cause, will often change a market, effect.
Despite what some may hope, the costs of environmental protection will not be borne by business, or by stockholders, or by the rich. They will show up in the price of products to be paid by users. If pollution is expensive, the market will opt for less of the products that cause it, just as surely as the higher price of gasoline has led to more fuel-efficient cars.
A third pattern for organizing your main points is theory, plan of action. You present your theory, and the plan of action that will implement that theory.
The battle station is heavily shielded and carries a firepower greater than half the Starfleet. A small one-man fighter should be able to penetrate the outer defense. An analysis of the plans provided by Princess Leia has demonstrated a weakness in the battle station. The approach will not be easy. You're required to maneuver straight down this trench and skim the surface to this point. The shaft leads directly to the reactor system. A precise hit will start a chain reaction which should destroy the station. Only a precise hit will set up a chain reaction.
What if your purpose is strictly to inform? Well, many presenters use patterns of time or space, patterns that explain your main points based on developments in time or relationships in space. I combined these two patterns in reporting America's trip to the moon.
This Apollo 11 mission gets to the moon just as did the dress rehearsals, Apollos 8 and 10. 9:32 a.m. Eastern Time, liftoff. 9:43. Into Earth orbit, 115 miles high, 17,500 miles an hour. Saturday, 1:26 p.m. Eastern Time, the moon's alongside and they break to go into lunar orbit, 69 miles high. 3:10 p.m. Sunday, Armstrong and Aldrin begin their landing approach, slow down and drop at 5 or 6 miles an hour onto the moon.
Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
Logical patterns will help the audience understand your main points. You can use problem solution, cause and effect, theory plan of action, time or space, or a combination of these. But your main points need more than a logical pattern. They need support, proof. The selection of support materials is another key skill in building your presentation. When President Reagan addressed the nation on the need for a stronger defense, he supported it with statistics.
Now let's consider conventional forces. Since 1974, the United States has produced 3,050 tactical combat aircraft. By contrast, the Soviet Union has produced twice as many. When we look at attack submarines, the United States has produced 27, while the Soviet Union has produced 61.
Franklin Roosevelt wanted everyone to understand the imbalance in the ownership of business securities in America. He made his point with an analogy.
That means that the ownership of about 4% of the securities controls the other 96%. There, my friends, is the case of a 96-inch dog being wagged by a 4-inch tail. Think of the power in that 4 inches.
Expert testimony is a powerful tool, especially when your expert speaks with this much authority.
Now be careful, R2. He made a fair move. Screaming about it can't help you.
Let him have it. It's not wise to upset a Wookiee.
But, sir, nobody worries about upsetting a droid.
That's because a droid don't pull people's arms out of their sockets when they lose.
I see your point, sir. I suggest a new strategy, R2. Let the Wookiee win.
Supporting your main points gives your presentation credibility. That increases your chances of delivering a presentation that's accepted, remembered, and acted upon. To support your main points, you can use statistics, analogies, expert testimony. In the close, your job is to focus the audience's attention on the ultimate reason for sharing your message, on your purpose. To do this, you summarize, return to your main theme, and focus the audience's attention on your purpose. In the opening of her speech, Barbara Jordan gained attention. In her close, she returned to her opening theme.
Now, I began this speech by commenting to you on the uniqueness of a Barbara Jordan making a keynote address. Well, I am going to close my speech by quoting a Republican president. And I ask you that as you listen to these words of Abraham Lincoln, relate them to the concept of a national community in which every last one of us participates. As I would not be a slave, so I would not be a master. This expresses my idea of democracy. Whatever differs from this, to the extent of the difference, is no democracy.
The close signals your audience, alerts them to a moment of decision. It's a time to evaluate the information, to make a judgment. In this presentation, Lee Iacocca closes by asking the audience to join him in a call for better government explanations about our economic choices.
I think that if our economic choices were presented clearly to the American people, they'd make the right decision, and I believe that in my heart. And when that happens, there won't be any question about our ability to compete as Americans vigorously and successfully. And then we can take on anybody in the world. Thank you very much for having me.
The real measure of success comes at the close. Although the close may be short, it's the part the audience is going to remember. It's a summary of the ground that you've covered together. Review, summarize, return to your opening theme, move toward your purpose. Let's review. Your presentation structure includes the open, the body, and the close. In your open, use attention-getting techniques and tell your audience what you're going to talk about. Some attention getters are a startling fact, a personal experience, a joke, a reference to the occasion. In the body of your presentation, organize your points into logical patterns that allow your audience to understand and recall your message. You can use problem solution, cause and effect, theory, plan of action, time or space, or a combination of these. To support your main points, you can use statistics, analogies, expert testimony. Finally, in your close, review, summarize, return to your opening theme, move toward your purpose. When you build your presentation, use these techniques and skills. All are practiced daily by effective presenters. But remembering that we're all human, keep in mind that even practice doesn't guarantee perfection.
George, you know Arthur Cunningham?
Right.
Delighted to see you, General. I've heard so much about you.
Gentlemen, it appears there's been some slight misunderstanding here, and I thought that we ought to get the whole thing straightened out.
No misunderstanding. We're supposed to have Allied air cover, and we don't get it. German planes are constantly strafing my troops.
If I may say so, General, I'm afraid your operations reports are inaccurate.
Reports? 3 days ago, the Krauts took off after my command car, ran my ass into a ditch.
My staff has assured me we have complete air supremacy everywhere in the Mediterranean. And I promise you one thing, General. You will see no more German planes.
We were discussing air supremacy, Sir Arthur.
Please stop the player now.
great presenters carefully choose the words they'll say to communicate with their audience and the movements they'll make to emphasize their ideas. It's called delivery. A delivery, like personality, is unique to every individual. You may think that presentation success is the special province of those with John Kennedy's natural good looks or Winston Churchill's gift with language. But consider that Kennedy frequently hid his shaking left hand in his pocket, and that Winston Churchill carried traces of a speech impediment from his youth.
That if the British Empire and its Commonwealth last for 1,000 years, men will still say, this was their finest hour.
Their spoken words swayed millions, but the great presenters struggled like the rest of us with fear and nervousness before they got up to speak. Too often we become our own worst enemies by focusing on uncertainties, on the things we don't know. How will the audience react? How will we be viewed? Will our reasoning be accepted? What have we forgotten? Will our purpose be achieved? Perhaps Pogo said it best in that now famous line, "We have met the enemy and he is us." Good speakers lessen their nervousness by focusing on what they do know, by taking the same steps we're taking today. They analyze their audience, define their purpose, organize their main points, and select supporting evidence. Very simply, they prepare. Now, this process gives them confidence, a sense of knowing what they'll say and how the audience will respond. But this preparation won't eliminate nervousness. Nervousness is a physical reaction. Heartbeat increases, breathing accelerates, all systems go to full speed. The experienced presenters channel this nervousness into an enthusiastic delivery.
I have a dream. My poor little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today.
Let's review. Nervousness is a physical reaction. Too often we become our own worst enemies by focusing on uncertainties. Review what you do know about the speaking situation. You've analyzed your audience. You've defined your purpose. You've prepared an open body and close with attention getters, logical patterns, and support for your main points. But this preparation won't eliminate nervousness. Channel this nervousness into an enthusiastic delivery. Organized your ideas and selected your support evidence, you'll know the form your speech will take. But there are many ways to express the same idea. And that means an effective speech requires careful selection of words based on your understanding of the audience and your purpose. Let's listen to the same idea expressed in two different ways.
First status report as follows. Burn on time. Burn time, 4 minutes, 6.5 seconds. VGX minus 1.4. Attitudes nominal. No trim. VGY was 0. VGZ was plus 0.2. Delta VC was minus 20.2. Orbit 169.1 by 60.5.
The initial blast was to put the Apollo 8 into an elliptical orbit, to be corrected later to a near circular path 69 miles above the lunar surface.
In their classic book, The Elements of Style, William Strunk and E.B. White give these rules for selecting words. Use definite, specific, concrete language. Prefer the specific to the general, the definite to the vague, the concrete to the abstract. When Lee Iacocca reflected on his exit from Ford Motor Company, he could have been vague, explained it as a departure based on a different management philosophy. But Iacocca was specific.
One other thing I'd like to straighten them out on.
Whenever they read my career record, they always come to that part. After 32 years at a company that I resigned, I always set the record straight. I was canned. I was fired. Did not resign.
Good communicators use specific language. They know that carefully chosen, concrete words paint their ideas into compelling pictures for the audience.
I have listened to the grandmother in East Oakland who no longer has a phone to call her grandchildren because she gave it up to pay the rent on her small apartment.
Sometimes when you're expressing an abstract idea, figures of speech like metaphors and similes can help. They can simplify and clarify your subject for the audience. Economist Milton Friedman defended President Reagan with this metaphor.
But at any rate, Knight always used to tell the story about a breed of ducks that fly in the sky in a V, with the leader in front. And every now and then, the ducks behind the leader will veer off and go in a different direction, and the duck keeps flying all by himself until he looks behind and sees there's nobody behind him, and then he runs around to get in front of the pack. That's every president we've had except for Mr. Reagan. But Mr. Reagan is different. He's been flying all by himself for 30 years, and the pack gotten back of him.
After choosing your words, turn your attention to the way you'll say them. As you speak, use pace, volume, and enunciation to keep your audience focused on your presentation. Barbara Jordan brought the 1976 Democratic Convention to its feet with her powerful keynote speech. Jordan's delivery was superb. Her pace was slow, her enunciation crisp. Her voice carried clearly throughout the hall.
A lot of years passed since 1832, and during that time it would have been most unusual for any national political party to ask a Barbara Jordan to deliver a keynote address. But tonight, here I am. And I feel that notwithstanding the past, that my presence here is one additional bit of evidence that the American dream need not forever be deferred.
Good delivery begins by understanding the skills of verbal communication. Let's review. Use definite, specific, concrete language. Whatever your words, do what all good presenters do. Speak out, speak clearly, speak to be understood. As you speak, remember that your actions speak as loudly as your words. So pay close attention to nonverbal communication, to your posture, your gestures, eye contact. When adopting a posture, let your knowledge of the audience and occasion be your guide. Your stance lets the audience know if the occasion is formal or informal, whether you plan to speak uninterrupted or if you'll invite interaction. A small, familiar group, as is often the case in business, calls for a relaxed posture, a stance that will encourage exchange with the audience. When working at a lectern, the audience will sense formality when you stand behind it, and informality when you stand beside or in front. The next nonverbal skill, selecting appropriate gestures. Shakespeare gave us the classic rule, suit the action to the word. Now, all words do not require gestures, but when you want to emphasize an important point, use natural gestures. The final nonverbal communication skill is eye contact. Use eye contact to establish rapport with your audience. Start by looking for a friendly face, and next focus on a small group within the audience. And finally, look to the whole group. This shows the audience that you're speaking with them. Let's review. Pay close attention to nonverbal communication. Select a stance appropriate to the situation. Use natural gestures. Establish eye contact with your audience. Final part of delivery is the use of visual aids. Properly used, they can significantly increase audience comprehension and add persuasive impact to your message. The first consideration in regard to visual aids is the most basic. Will visual aids improve audience understanding of your presentation? Remember that visual aids compete with your words for audience attention. We asked Dr. Bruce Gronbeck, professor at the University of Iowa and author of the widely used text, Principles of Speech Communication, for some suggestions on visual aids.
I expect most people in business, as they put together various kinds of presentations, as they put together pamphlets, as they put together annual reports, rely very, very heavily on different kinds of graphs. I think what you have to do is decide what kind of graph you need in that sort of situation. Suppose, for example, you're trying to show a relationship between the amount of money your division has spent on research and development and its net profits. Simply giving people the figures in that kind of case won't work much, won't help much. But if you give them a bar graph, one that shows the comparison that as research and development monies have increased, so have net profits, then that bar graph has done some work for you. Or let's suppose in the annual report you're trying to show how you spent your money. A bar graph won't do you an awful lot of good, but a pie graph will, where you have different slices that show different amounts of money being devoted. That's to different kinds of activities, and that's because a pie graph is really very good for showing proportions. There are other kinds of graphs. Progress through time, you use a line graph. Or if you want to really show the internal operations of something, you go to various sorts of cutaways. In other words, there are many different kinds of graphs, I think, that are used very, very heavily in business. The one you use will depend ultimately on the kind of information you're trying to drive home.
Effective visual aids are simple, showing only the necessary information. It should be large enough to be seen clearly by everyone in the room, and to be effective, they must be integrated into your speech. So it's a good idea to practice your talk with the prepared visual aids. When reporting the American space program, we often use visual aids to help you understand what was happening beyond the range of our cameras. The Saturn third stage, still attached, is fired up again to push Apollo out of Earth orbit and toward the moon. The next order of business is to strip open the adapter panels which shield the LEM, the Lunar Excursion Module. And then the three-man crew gets the first chance to use the docking techniques developed during Gemini. The Apollo moves away, turns around, comes back, docks with the LEM, and then draws it clear of the Saturn third stage. And in business, visual aids can graphically support your words, add impact to your message, and simplify your points to the audience.
We can be proud of our record of remaining with our customers through good times and bad. This clearly indicates, as I am sure you will agree, that we have been more than conservative in what we have set aside. Over the last 10 years, and every year but one, the amount we have set aside for possible losses has comfortably exceeded write-offs. Here's another chart, and one that makes me particularly proud, for it shows remarkable progress by many people in virtually every part of our organization.
Let's review the skills of delivery. First, nervousness. Nervousness is a physical reaction. Too often we become our own worst enemies by focusing on uncertainties. You've analyzed your audience, you've defined your purpose, you've prepared an open body and close with attention getters, logical patterns, and support for your main points. But this preparation won't eliminate nervousness. Channel this nervousness into an enthusiastic delivery. Second, verbal communication. Use definite, specific, concrete language. Whatever your words, do what all good presenters do. Speak out, speak clearly, speak to be understood. Third, nonverbal communication. Select a stance appropriate to the situation, use natural gestures, and establish eye contact with your audience. And finally, visual aids. Use them only when they add understanding to your message. Make them simple and easy to see, tie them to your words, and practice using them. But if you make a mistake, don't take it to heart. Even the seasoned professional stumbles occasionally.
Recently, I received a letter from Masayasu Okamura Oh, damn it.
In this dramatic scene from the film Norma Ray, union organizer Reuben Wachowski, if you'd written it in Polish, I could have read it, but this Indian spelling of the name throws me off. Okay, let's go.
There are two major promises he has not been able to keep, and those are the promises to put more Americans back to work, and the second promise is the promise to, what is that second promise? Deficits, budget, balance the budget, that's right.
Please stop the player now.
Handling questions. It's a chance to see how well you've done, how well you've communicated with your audience. It's your opportunity to summarize group feelings and reach consensus. Encourage questions, especially if your purpose is to persuade. There are several techniques available for managing questions and answers. Yale professors Mariah Holcomb and Judith Stein cover this subject in their book, Presentations for Decision Makers. We ask them to comment.
Basic principles in handling questions have got to be, you have to prepare, you have to listen very, very carefully to the content of the question. In the end, you have to play it straight, and you have to be polite. I mean, those four things. I can't think of anything that's prepare and listen and play it straight and be polite.
You want to listen actively to be sure that, in fact, you're right. You do have the question. You are answering the question that's asked. You let the questioner finish. You're open in the way in which the exchange is beginning to develop.
The more they talk, the more you'll know, and the more better able you'll be to answer the question. The question and answer session is just a fantastic opportunity to sell again, to reiterate, and to come to closure on some of these things. It's a great opportunity. That's the way people ought to look at it, instead of a cause for horror.
Pay close attention to each question. If you don't understand the question, ask for clarification. Then verify your understanding by restating the question. The restatement does two things. It gives you time to consider your answer, and it helps the whole group hear and understand what's been asked.
What is the recovery process?
The question is, what can we predict about the recovery process? And I honestly can't make any prediction on that. It's never been done before.
If a question has several parts, answer each in the order that best serves your audience and purpose.
I wonder if you could tell us whether, if you had it to do over again, you would work for the presidency, and whether you can recommend the job to others.
Well, the answer is, the first is yes, and the second is no. I don't recommend it to others, at least for a while.
If the question calls for an opinion, give one and support it with evidence.
Can this administration get back on track at this point? And if so, what advice would you give?
I think the president can get her back on course, but he's going to have to do something he's unwilling to do. He is a stubborn individual. He is stubborn on his defense buildup. He's not satisfied with the 3% real add-on or the 5% or the 9%. He wants 14%. And he's stubborn about this 10% tax cuts, borrow $60 billion to give ourselves a tax cut this July. As I said, if $180 billion, 3 times the highest deficit we ever had, will not stimulate the economy, how in the world is another $60 billion going to do the job?
When asked a question, be brief, be direct, and relate it to your main points.
Sir, did you say if you found your army between the Germans and the Russians, you'd attack in both directions?
No, I never said that. I never said any such thing. But I wish I had.
Planning for the question and answer period is the final step in preparing your presentation. Let's review. Very simply, prepare. Listen. Pay close attention to each question. Be brief, be clear, and to the point. There's an anecdote about Churchill's preparation for a speech to the House of Commons. Churchill's butler overheard him speaking aloud in the bathroom. He rushed to the bathroom. "Pardon me, sir," he said. "Are you addressing me?" "No," Churchill replied. "I'm addressing the House of Commons." Churchill's real preparation technique was to visualize himself as an effective speaker before his audience. Now, this can work for you. You can visualize success. As you approach the lectern or enter the conference room or take position in the office, visualize success by keeping in mind that you've analyzed your audience, you've defined your purpose, you've prepared an open body and close with attention getters, logical patterns, and support for your main points. You've determined how you will deliver your presentation and selected visual aids. Now, envision yourself speaking with impact, with success. Envision your audience responding favorably. Channel your nervous energy into enthusiasm and begin.
Our free enterprise economic system is still the best there is. We've still got the freedom, think of it, to do what we want, to work where we want, and to do it the way we want.
Today, we've set you on the road toward presentation excellence, from preparing your presentation to preparing yourself for that presentation. You've taken the first step. You know the skills you need to speak with confidence, to do justice to your best ideas. And it is your ideas, understood by the audience, that motivate, inform, persuade, inspire, that can turn a thought in the mind to a man on the moon.
I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal before this decade is out of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the earth. But in a very real sense, it will not be one man going to the moon. We make this judgment affirmatively. It will be an entire nation.
We're on the way. Stand by for mode 1 Bravo. Mark 1 Bravo. 1 Bravo, that's one small step for man. One giant leap for mankind.
Every time you face an audience, you have an opportunity to travel together toward a common understanding, a meeting of minds introduced by the power of communication. For those who have traveled the road to presentation excellence, and for you who are starting today, that's the way it was. That's the way it is.